Welcome back. This is a special edition of Front Row with me, Abi Agina. And tonight we're discussing alcohol control measures in light of the coronavirus pandemic. How are we coping as a country? What are the hits and misses? I have a very interesting set of panelists who are going to shed more light into this very important subject. Like I mentioned, we want to open up our Zoom lines where we'll be getting some feedback from our audiences joining us from their living rooms from various parts of the country. And I want to bring in a very interesting contributor from Donna Obuaka, who is joining us via Zoom. Thank you so much, Donna. Just tell us, just introduce yourself and what has been your experience with alcoholism and what do you make of this current pandemic and what's your advice?
Well, as you have said, my name is Dora Obuaka. I'm a recovered addict. I don't believe in saying still recovering, but I have recovered from addiction. It began with alcohol, obviously, and went into a huge battle that was beyond alcoholism, which for me right now is my biggest concern is for the young people who are experimenting with alcohol and thinking that, it's just a normal pastime, but really one drug opens the door to another. So we may be talking about alcoholism and alcohol, but really it is able to start a fire that cannot be contained. Definitely we've seen a rise in the participants in alcohol, especially in the young people. This is because they are not in school, they are idle, they are spending more time, outside of a structured environment. It's a time that is tough, especially in this sector of addiction.
All right.
It's a sad time.
Mm-hmm. What was your experience with alcoholism? Just take us back and how are things now that you've recovered, and congratulations for that. How did you rediscover you are alcoholic?
Well, as I told you, it began with alcohol and actually went into marijuana and heroin and a lot of other things. But initially, it was just the alcohol. I started drinking when I was under 18. I was actually 17 years old, and I was able to purchase from just your regular store. They would not ask me for ID. They would not ask me if I'm of age. So purchase of alcohol was very easy. I didn't have to ask anybody to get it for me. I would just stroll in and get it. And a lot of people are not aware that addiction is not an event, it is a journey. So what started out as just a weekend thing slowly trickled into the weekdays. And whereas I was able to control in the beginning, I was able to say when and where I would use and how I would use it, it slowly turned into a monster that I was unable to control. So it started with the alcohol, moved into cigarettes, and soon came all these other things. It got to a point where I was no longer in control. People would see me and tell me, why don't you just stop? But whereas in the beginning I had made the decision to go looking for the drugs, it got to a point where I had no say in the matter.
Okay. And I'm very touched by your journey of recovery. How were you able to purchase? Were you buying from the local stores? How was it?
I was buying from the local stores. In fact, I was buying from a popular mall that was right opposite our estate. So I didn't have to pay for transport. I would just walk across the road and purchase, and nobody asked me anything. As you've mentioned, the younger people, obviously one of the cutbacks is having a smaller budget. But really, there's alcohol that is accessible for everybody.
Okay.
If you think about the different brands and the different prices, really anybody is able to access alcohol, whether you're 17, whether you're 30. There's availability and accessibility, and that's what makes it so dangerous. I don't know about the asking of IDs right now, but the time when I was drinking underage, there was no check on ID or no ID.
Thank you, Obuaka. Just hold your thoughts. I'd like to bring in Mr. Cheng from Kara, the Residents Association. There's been a lot of concern in the number of the wines and spirits outlets that have mushroomed in residential areas. I don't know, what would be your take on this? How have you been able to ensure that there's participation by the local residents? And you've also been accused of not ensuring that the numbers are put in check.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's true that there's an upsurge of the liquor places in residential areas. And this obviously goes to what addressed earlier in terms of how do these people get licensed to operate in these particular areas. If you look at the Alcoholic Drink Licensing Act, it actually stipulates that we should not have liquor outlets or bars within residential areas and within 300 meters of learning institutions. But yet you still find that these kind of outlets are found in those particular areas. So this goes to talk to a bigger picture, a bigger problem. And the problem is the point of allowing these people to operate. One, they've been licensed to operate or they're operating illegally. And if they're operating illegally, then it means that they are not being monitored in terms of the operations, because they ought to be people who are doing inspection and making sure that such kind of outlets operating illegally are actually closed down. I agree with Mr. Okioma when he said earlier that enforcement is a collective responsibility. But I think the government bears a bigger responsibility because they have the means and the mechanisms to ensure that whoever is offending the law is actually punished. The challenge that we have is that you realize that communities, and particularly the resident association, are actually at times going out of their way to provide information on outlets or bars that are operating where they're not supposed to operate. But then what happens is that some of this information is not acted upon, and those who may be sent to act upon the information end up maybe colluding with the operators of the bars.
All right.
So I think the whole problem is, of course, around enforcement, but also around ensuring that there's the information that is derived from the communities is actually acted upon and proper action is taken by the relevant authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Cheng. Let me rope in Mr. Gashishio, County Secretary Nyeri. Where do the counties lie in this debate in terms of putting revenue ahead of safety, ahead of law enforcement? We've seen the counties allowing various liquor stores to be set up because for the counties, it's about the revenues. They'll be collecting fees for the licenses. And of course, this raises very grave questions around what is the county doing in terms of abiding to the Alcoholic Drinks Control Act of 2010. What is your take on this? Sorry, Mr. Gashishio, you just muted your mic. Would you unmute it? All right, carry on.
Am I clear now?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just saying, Mr. Agina, that if I can just talk about Nyeri because I'm familiar with Nyeri. Mm-hmm. Now, after the declaration of the public order curfew,
yes,
Nyeri County government came up with a regulation which was gazetted on, I think, on 20th March, which restricted the following: general retail alcoholic licenses, restaurants, bars, club alcoholic, nightclubs, travelers, all those who are closed. And the only areas that were left are maybe a few supermarkets and a few outlets here. So, which means that and that is the general trend. The general policy in Nyeri is open door policy, where we consult the stakeholders, we agree, and we enforce where we can.
Yes.
But I agree that there are some people who will always try to beat the law by doing illegal activities behind the enforcement officers. The other challenge, of course, is the issue of capacity. Like now, how do you monitor people who are drinking in the villages, in the forests, in the tea farms, in the coffee farms, in behind the shops? How do you monitor those people?
That's very hard to monitor indeed, yeah.
Yes, so we are doing whatever we can to do, but there are those challenges. The also other good thing is that leadership is very key. If you look at, for example, in Nyeri, you find that most of the leaders we have, like His Excellency the Governor, doesn't drink. I personally don't drink. But so the issue of money is not too much focused. We are not really focused on money, but also you realize that bars and restaurants and clubs are a great source of employment for people. Our only concern is abiding by the law. When people abide by the law, the Health Act, we don't want to interfere with the people's business. But definitely it is difficult to balance revenue and business. It's a difficult thing, but I think in Nyeri we are trying to balance the two. Thank you.
Mr. Okioma, would you like to pass a rejoinder to this?
Let me join in the discussion, particularly referring to the comments by my brother from Nyeri. I think Nyeri County is one of the counties we have had very productive engagement with. And I can say that in the discussions we have had, this issue of reducing the number of bars has become, I think it's an issue we have agreed about. So it's a question of implementation of the agreed course of action. But let me put it this way, that as an authority, we have a great concerns around the issue of mushrooming of bars. And this is a whole, it's just about the revenue. And we have had a lot of discussions with county governments on this issue. And we have told them that if, for example, you can target bars within residential areas in your areas of jurisdiction, if you can look at those bars and restaurants that are located next to institutions of learning, churches, you know, and the places where there is no proper security for the revelers who want to drink.
But how did they get their approvals in the first place?
You see, that is where the problem is. And that's where we need now to, if you start asking how this happened, we will go into some quagmire. I think what we need to focus on, how do we now address the challenge currently? And to me, going forward is let us get all these bars that are located in areas where they shouldn't be. And if you did that, as county government, which have the licensing mandate, and I think I need to come out very clear here, that many people, when they see mushrooming of bars, they will quickly say Nakada has failed in its mandate. But I can tell you that the current constitution devolved this licensing function to counties. And therefore, if the counties can use their licensing function and look at bars which are located in areas where they shouldn't be, they will cut these bars by more than half. So it is really, to me, it's a challenge that can only be addressed by the county governments. And I also, by the way, I should mention that we have had very fruitful engagement with the CARA. We participate in their annual conference where they have awards, and one of the awards we have sponsored as an authority is on the best residents association in terms of you know, creating awareness among the residents about the dangers of alcohol and drugs. And we will continue to partner with CARA on this issue. So I'm saying that one of the control measures that the counties have at their disposal is the licensing mandate. And using that licensing mandate, they can control these bars to a bare minimum, so that bars are located where this is designated as an area for entertainment, so that anything outside that shouldn't be there. What would be a bar be doing in a residential area where people want to sleep? So this is really our concern as an authority.
Don't you have the mechanisms to enforce and have these bars shut down?
Well, I think, yes, I want to say that we do, because one of our mandate is to work with other partners to carry out operations to close some of these places. And we have done it. In fact, if I had come with figures, you'll be surprised that we have closed so many of these bars.
All right.
But what I want to say is that before we come in, the licensing mandate should be actually used to contain this mushrooming of bars.
All right.
Yes.
It takes us to the next area of focus. Mr. Muya, we are getting unconfirmed reports that there are some of the bars and pubs that have been secretly opening to some of their patrons to come and enjoy their favorite drinks. How true is this, and have you received any such cases? And I open this question to the rest of the panelists who can also weigh in.
Mr. Gina, thank you. When I sit here and talk for bars, of course, everybody will look like I'm representing the entire bar industry in this country. That's a reverse from the truth. The same way, Mr. Agena, you personally, you are in the media, and I'm sure you belong to a business management organization that regulates media. But you don't answer questions for the gutter place that is just as widespread as the formal place. So when I sit here, I'm representing the legitimate businesses. Members in my sector are legitimate bar operators who have applied, they have followed all the requirements, and they have gotten the license. Let me tell you where the problem is, and we have got to say it. The problem is actually from licensing, and this is from the county governments. And I don't think the county government is driven by money for licensing so many bars, because the fact is majority of the bars are not licensed. So I don't think they're also getting the official revenue as many would like to believe. Mm-hmm. The Mutuzo law, let me finish, please. The Mutuzo law, that is the Alcoholic Drink Control Act, those laws, with minor amendments, they are actually good and they are enough to check the mushrooming of bars. But the fact is, the county licensing boards, this is where the problem is. They are composed of people who don't have any interest in the business. They have no expertise in the matters of trade. These are personal appointees of political leaders. I can mention here, in Nairobi, where I live and do business, the sub-county liquor licensing boards, they consist of 7 people. There is an official from public health, the police boss of the county, and the 2 officials. But the other 4 people are actually appointees of the governor alone. The governor appoints the chairman of the liquor board. The governor appoints 3 other residents who are supposed to be residents of a particular sub-county to sit on that board. And that's where the powers were given wrongly, because the act does not require the governor to require for any credentials from these people. And these are the people, dear Nairobians, dear Kenyans, these are the people who sit in the boards to give you licenses. And that's why we have the problems we have. In the Nairobi City County Liquor Licensing and Control Act, there are 3 sections I can point here: Section 8, Section 10, and Section 11. If those sections are followed to the letter, then we won't have all these problems we are talking about. But for the interest of some other people, these acts, I mean, those sections are not followed. Section 8 requires the Liquor Licensing Committee, after receiving applications, to publicize the names and all the details of applicants in an official Kenya Gazette and pin the names all over, so that residents or group of residents like Kara and others can raise objections before. Section 10 requires for somebody who is putting up a new bar to go present an application to the Liquor Licensing Committee, accompanied by the plans with the details of what kind of license he is applying for, so that he can be denied even before starting construction. Nothing like that happens. Section 11 requires, again, the same committee, when they sit to give the licenses, to consider matters of population density and the numbers of bar available. Before they sit down to license any bar, the first question is, does this community, does this area even require an extra bar? More often than not, it doesn't.
Thank you.
Even us in the legitimate business, we are the victims of the same haphazard licensing procedures by the county government. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Moya. Let me quickly get Mr. Gashishio's response to this. What is the best way forward?
Thank you very much, Mr. Agina. I have heard what Mr. Moya have said, and these are challenges. I do not want to agree that these problems are uniform. As I have said, if I want to talk about Nyeri, the trick is what the CEO for Nakada said, that licensing is key, and I agree. And what should be done is to ensure that there is proper public participation, so that actually the people, like the residents in urban areas, the wananchi in the villages, actually decide whether they want a bar or not. And that is one of the things we have been doing in Nyeri, where the people say they don't want a bar, it is never licensed. But of course, there are some few elements within the system who are corrupt, but who may try to assist 1 or 2 friends here. But the trick is effective public participation. Let the people decide whether they want a bar or not. And that one we are doing in Nyeri. Any issue where the public don't want a bar, we don't license them. And if they are given, we always cancel them. So I agree, licensing is key. And the issue of integrity by the people in the alcoholic committee is key. Okay. And I also agree that there should be more representative from stakeholders.
Thank you.
So that they are also heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gashishio. Well, a lot being mentioned here, and of course a lot of debates around some of the pronouncements that are being made by the panelists. And of course, we're going to go on a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be looking at rehabilitation centers. What needs to be done towards ensuring that we are able to take care of those who are on a journey of recovery, like what we heard from Dora, who will also be joining us, as well as other participants from across the country. Keep it locked here on KT News.